What happens to a child when the world turns its back? This is the haunting story of a boy abandoned in a small American town. A story of pain, hope, and the fight for belonging. The town of Willow Creek was small, quiet, and unremarkable to the outside world. Nestled between rugged mountains and a winding river, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and gossip traveled faster than the wind. Life there was simple. The blacksmith worked in his forge from dawn till dusk, the baker's oven filled the streets with the smell of bread every morning, and children ran across the dusty roads chasing each other with laughter. But on one cold winter's night, Willow Creek carried a silence that felt heavier than usual. The air was sharp, biting against the skin, and the wind howled through the narrow alleys like a wounded animal. The church at the center of town stood tall, its stone walls weathered by decades, its heavy wooden doors locked for the night. On those very steps, curled up against the door for shelter, lay a boy no older than 11. His name was Elias. He wore nothing more than a torn shirt, its fabric too thin for the biting cold, and a pair of pants that barely reached his ankles. His feet were bare, his skin cracked and red from frost. He hugged himself tightly, trying to trap any warmth left in his fragile body. His small frame shivered uncontrollably, and every breath that escaped his lips formed a faint cloud in the night air. Passers-by noticed him, they always did, but they never stopped for long. A woman carrying a basket clutched it tighter as she walked by, muttering, "Poor child." "But what can I do?" A man on horseback slowed for a moment, glanced at him, then kicked his horse forward without a word. Children had once tried to approach him, but their parents pulled them back, whispering warnings about that orphan boy. The people of Willow Creek knew Elias's story, or at least they thought they did. His parents had left town months ago. Some said they died of sickness, others whispered they ran away to escape their debts. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was that they were gone and they had not taken him with them. In a town where family meant survival, Elias had none. And so the people gave him a cruel title that stuck to him like a curse, the Forgotten Child. That night, the boy pressed his cheek against the cold wood of the church door, pretending it was something else: his mother's lap, his father's arms, anything but the emptiness he felt. His stomach growled from hunger. He hadn't eaten a full meal in days, only scraps he scavenged from behind the bakery or whatever leftovers he could steal before the dogs found them. He whispered to himself, as he often did when loneliness clawed at him. "Don't cry. If you cry, the cold will only get worse." He tilted his head back and looked at the stars. They sparkled faintly in the vast black sky, distant and untouchable. "Do you see me?" he asked them in a trembling voice. "Does anyone see me?" Hours passed. The wind grew stronger, rattling the shutters of nearby houses. Elias pulled his knees to his chest, trying to disappear into himself. Every sound in the night startled him: the hoot of an owl, the bark of a stray dog, the crunch of footsteps on snow. He often wondered if his parents would return. Perhaps they had only gone for a little while. Perhaps tomorrow he would wake up to see them calling his name. But deep down, he knew the truth. If they had wanted him, they would not have left him here. And yet, despite the heaviness of that truth, a small spark lived inside him. He refused to lie down and die. Every day he told himself the same thing: one more night. Just survive one more night. The bells of the church tower chimed midnight. The sound echoed across the empty streets. Elias shivered harder, curling tighter, as though the sound itself reminded him of the hours still left before dawn. By morning, when the first rays of sunlight touched the rooftops of Willow Creek, the boy was still there, half asleep, half frozen, still waiting for something or someone that might never come. The days in Willow Creek were harsh for a boy with no family. Elias woke every morning with stiff limbs from sleeping on stone, his body aching as if he had aged decades overnight. He would stretch, rub his arms for warmth, and look toward the bakery at the end of the street. The smell of fresh bread was both torture and salvation. Sometimes, when the baker's boy wasn't looking, Elias would dart forward, grab a crust left on the windowsill, and vanish into the alleys before anyone noticed. Other times, he would wait until the townsfolk finished their meals at the tavern, sneaking behind to gather scraps thrown to the dogs. He had learned to move quickly, silently, always ready to run. But hunger was only part of his struggle. Loneliness was heavier. Children of the town played in groups, their laughter echoing through the streets, yet Elias was never invited. He would watch them from a distance, longing to join, but when he took even a single step toward them, the laughter would stop. "There's the orphan," one child would sneer. "Stay away," another's mother would warn. The sting of rejection burned more than the cold ever could. Nights were worse. The wind would press against the church doors, whistling like a ghost. Elias would lie awake, his stomach empty, whispering to himself just to hear a voice. "Tomorrow will be better," he said once. But deep down, he didn't believe it. Winter grew harsher. Snow blanketed the roofs and streets, turning Willow Creek into a painting of white silence. Elias's small frame grew weaker, his lips cracked, his fingers numb. He scavenged old blankets from trash piles, wrapping them around his shoulders. Still, the cold bit through. One night, a group of boys passed him as he shivered near the church. Instead of pity, they threw stones at him. "Go away, stray dog," one shouted. Elias covered his face, curled up tighter, and wished the earth would swallow him whole. When they left, he whispered through his tears, "Why me? What did I do wrong?" And yet, every dawn, he rose again somehow. His spirit, though battered, refused to break completely. He still searched for signs, for hope, for something to tell him he mattered. Then, one cold Sunday morning, when the bells of the church rang louder than usual, fate began to change. Among the crowd walking into the service was a woman unlike the rest. Her name was Margaret. A widow, her silver hair tied neatly beneath a scarf, her eyes tired but kind. While others looked past Elias, Margaret slowed her steps. She saw not just a beggar child, but a boy trying desperately to survive. As the congregation filed inside, Margaret lingered. The boy hugged his knees, his lips blue, his eyes distant. For the first time in months, someone bent down and spoke to him. "How long have you been here, child?" she asked softly. Elias blinked, unsure if he should answer. His voice cracked as he whispered, I don't remember anymore." Margaret's heart clenched. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, and in that moment, Elias felt something he hadn't felt in so long: warmth. Not from a fire, not from food, but from human kindness. That evening, while the town gossiped about the orphan boy, Margaret made a decision that would change both their lives. She opened the door of her small cottage to him. Inside, Elias saw a fireplace glowing, a wooden table set for supper, and a bed waiting in the corner. For the first time in months, Elias ate until he was full. For the first time in months, he slept under a roof. And for the first time in months, he dreamed of something other than survival. Life inside Margaret's cottage felt like stepping into another world. The first night, Elias lay on a bed so soft that he thought he was floating. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the air with warmth that wrapped around him like a blanket. The smell of soup and bread lingered, and for once, his stomach didn't twist with hunger. Yet, as he stared at the ceiling beams above, sleep refused to come easily. His mind replayed the same fear again and again. What if this doesn't last? What if she grows tired of me? What if she sends me away like the others did? Margaret noticed his unease. She moved gently, never forcing questions on him, but her eyes always searched his face. She gave him tasks, small chores, like fetching water from the well, sweeping the floor, or feeding the chickens. Elias completed them without complaint, eager to prove he was worth keeping. But at night, when the cottage grew quiet, he sometimes crept to the window and stared out at the church steps where he used to sleep. Part of him felt he still belonged there, unwanted and unseen. One evening, Margaret sat by the fire while Elias folded blankets. She spoke softly, as though she had been rehearsing the words all day. "Elias," she began, "I cannot replace the family you lost, but if you allow it, I can give you a home." The boy froze. The blanket slipped from his hands, a lump rose in his throat. For so long, he had begged for someone to say those very words, yet instead of joy, fear gripped him. His voice was barely a whisper. "People always leave." Margaret reached for his hand, her touch steady and firm. "Not everyone leaves, child, some of us stay." Tears welled in his eyes, and for the first time, he let them fall. That night, he cried himself to sleep, not from hunger or cold, but from the unfamiliar weight of hope pressing against his heart. Winter in Willow Creek grew cruel. The snow piled high, storms rattled windows, and the cold seemed determined to crush anyone who dared stand against it. Inside the cottage, Elias had begun to feel a rhythm to his new life. Each morning he fetched water from the frozen well, chopped wood until his arms ached, and sat with Margaret as she mended clothes or told stories of her youth. But fate, as always, tested him. One stormy night, Margaret collapsed by the hearth. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow. The doctor, after examining her, shook his head. "She is weak," he said gravely. "Without care, she will not last the winter." Panic surged through Elias. The thought of losing Margaret, the only person who had chosen him, was unbearable. He ran into the blizzard, snow biting into his skin, desperate to find help. He knocked on doors, begged neighbors for herbs, medicine, anything that might keep her alive. Many turned him away. "She's too old," they said. "The storm will take her." But Elias refused to give up. For days, he fought against exhaustion. He chopped endless wood to keep the fire alive. He fed Margaret spoonfuls of broth when she could barely swallow. He stayed by her side through the nights, whispering, "Don't leave me, please. You're all I have." His small body ached, his hands blistered, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. Slowly, against all odds, Margaret's strength returned. When her eyes opened one morning, she saw Elias asleep in a chair beside her bed, his head resting on his folded arms. His face was gaunt, his clothes ragged, but his devotion was carved into every line of him. In that moment, Margaret understood the truth. This boy was no longer just a lost child she had pitied, he was her family. Spring eventually came to Willow Creek. Snow melted, rivers swelled, and flowers pushed through the soil. Elias no longer lingered at the church steps. Instead, he walked proudly beside Margaret in the marketplace, carrying baskets and greeting neighbors with quiet confidence. The whispers of the town changed. No longer the forgotten child. Now they said, "That's Margaret's boy." But Elias knew better than anyone. Family was not about blood. It was about who stayed when everyone else walked away. And in that truth, he had finally found where he belonged.